Hello, my name is Mary Furlong, and today I'll be analyzing an art piece by the artist Nicholas Galanin. Now, on the right is a picture of Galanin, and he is a contemporary artist. He does have some traditional work, but most of it is contemporary. And today I'll be analyzing one of his contemporary pieces called Never Forget. Now, a bit of background on his piece, Never Forget. It was built in Palm Springs, California, and it is a 45-foot tall sign that reads Indian Land. Now, it was produced by Desert X Art Exhibit, and it was created around the early months of the year 2021. So if you look at the image on the right, you might be reminded of a specific landmark within the United States, such as the Hollywood sign in Los Angeles, California. And that's actually was meant to be because the Hollywood sign was actually the inspiration behind the look of this sign. Now, there is a reason for that, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But the biggest thing was it was also meant to build awareness around the land back movement and indigenous land going back to tribes and committees. Nicholas Galanin himself, a bit about him, he is an Ombridex and a Tlingit artist and musician. Now, those are two tribes that are native to Alaska, and Galanin himself was born and raised in Sitka, Alaska. But his work can be found all over the country, in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and many other art exhibits. Now, Galanin is a big land back movement activist, and most of his work surrounds the idea of the land back movement. Now, for those who don't know, the Land Back movement is a global campaign to reclaim indigenous land and resources from white supremacists and oppressive systems. So, a bit of context and functions. So, some materials that we used were reflective panels, metal framing, steel pipes and screws, and construction equipment. There was a big group of people that worked together to build this sign. Like, it's 45 feet tall. They needed a lot of people, especially construction equipment. They needed cranes and lifts and many tools to build it. Now, the placement was important because it was in Palm Springs, California, which is a touristy spot. It was also placed near a highway, which there are thousands of people in traffic every single day passing by this sign to be reminded of indigenous land and the fact that indigenous tribes are still here. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the inspiration for this art piece was the Hollywood sign, and there's a specific reason behind that. Originally, the Hollywood sign used to read Hollywood Land, and it was an advertisement for a company called Hollywood Land Real Estate Company. But the thing about this is that this company would only ever sell or purchase land from people who were white. It was a whites only company. Now, the company went down in the 1940s, as it should, honestly. And the city of Los Angeles then bought the sign, took down the land, keeping Hollywood and creating the landmark of the city that it is today. Even though the Hollywood sign was rebranded, that doesn't take away the original meaning behind the sign. Though in the past they might have just thought it was a real estate ad, in actuality it stood for discrimination and racism. Now, the reason behind Galanin's artwork of Never Forget was to bring awareness to this Hollywood sign and the history of it, and the racist company that was selling and purchasing land that never really belonged to them to begin with, and that originally belonged to indigenous people. It was also meant to be an invitation of sorts to landowners to donate their land back to indigenous tribes and committees so then they can take care and preserve the land as they did many generations ago. So on to course themes relating to this artwork. So I have 3 course themes. The first is colonialism. And for those who don't remember or just did not pay attention in class, colonialism is the act of an oppression force taking over a group or nation, stripping them of their culture and forcing them to adopt another culture's norms and values. And this is shown through the taking of the land, through the topic itself. Indigenous people were pushed back into a corner, their land was taken, and they were forced to deal with it. They were told to stay quiet, which brings me into my next course theme, which is survivance. And survivance is not only physical survivance, but also cultural survivance, by remembering their language, stories, and traditions. And this is shown through the sign itself, saying that these tribes are still alive, that they have not disappeared, and that they have not forgotten that the land was originally theirs, and they want to take it back. It shows that they're still alive, they're still fighting for it, which also brings me into my last course theme, resistance. Now, resistance is standing up for what you believe in and no longer accepting the way something is done. And let's be honest, it is a 45-foot tall sign. It's not subtle. It is screaming. The artists and other people involved within these art pieces are pushing back. They're not accepting the fact that the land does not belong to Indigenous people and their tribes anymore. They're done being told that there's nothing they can do, so they're doing something about it instead. For me personally, this work's mostly affected the way I viewed colonialism and resistance. Through colonialism, it really showed how these tribes and their land was taken from them, how they were told just to deal with it. And for resistance, they are screaming back. And they can't be quiet because then they wouldn't be heard. They have to be loud. They have to create 45-foot tall signs just to be heard over their fact. Now here's one last look at the artwork called Never Forget by Nicholas Galanin. Sadly, the sign was taken down in August of 2021 because ironically and sadly, the exhibit came to an end, as well as the contract with the land it was on. So I do wish it was still standing to this day. I would be able to see it in person. Unfortunately, I learned about it a little too late. But either way, I am glad I was able to learn something about Nicholas Galanin's work of Never Forget, and learn a bit more about Indigenous land and the land back movement. Thank you for listening.